Now for today's program. Zibby Owens is the author and editor of the USA Today bestselling anthology On Being Jewish Now, Reflections from Authors and Advocates, as well as 5 other books. As founder and CEO of Zibby Media, she hosts the award-winning podcast Totally Booked with Zibby, owns Zibby's bookshop in Santa Monica, California, runs the Zibby Publishing House, and hosts retreats, a book club, and frequent events for book lovers. She also founded the original essay publication On Being Jewish Now on Substack. Annabelle Gurwitch is a New York Times bestselling author and two-time finalist for the Thurber Prize for American Humor Writing. Her essays and satire appear in The New Yorker, New York Times, Washington Post, and Hadassah. Most recently, Your Living When was a New York Times favorite book for healthy living. Her next book, The End of My Life is Killing Me, will be published in 2026 by Zibby Publishing. Joining Zibby and Annabelle is Amy E. Schwartz, Moment Magazine's book and opinion editor, as well as editor of the magazine's popular Ask the Rabbi section, and she won first place in commentary from the Religion News Association. Before coming to Moment, Amy was a longtime editorial writer and op-ed columnist at the Washington Post, where she was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize in commentary. Amy is president of the Non-Denominational Jewish Studies Center in Washington, D.C., and is the editor of the book Can Robots Be Jewish and Other Pressing Questions of Modern Life. Please welcome Zibby Owens, Annabelle Gurwitch, and Amy E. Schwartz.
Thank you very much, Suzanne, and thank you, Zivy and Annabelle, for coming on. Thanks so much also for the vision that has given us this book. I wanted to start, this is such a kaleidoscope of a book. It's got such an enormous, sweeping title, On Being Jewish Today, and yet it's made up of all these tiny little scenes and personal stories. And, the American Jewish experience is sort of emerges from this. And, these small pieces add up to something very big. Annabelle, you're in Rome, so I feel like saying something about mosaics, but I'm going to let it go. So I wanted to start by asking each of you, first of all, how you came to conceive of this project. And secondly, do you feel like it was sort of the inevitable, something that arose inevitably from your life and from your Jewish life, or was it a total bolt from the blue, a change of direction? Zibby, why don't you start?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, and thanks to Moment for inviting us to do this really fun panel, which maybe is a little lighter than next week's. So we'll see. Annabelle was one of the funniest people I know, not to put any pressure on her. Did this come completely out of the blue? I actually just posted on Instagram this morning a letter I wrote to my school principal from 4th grade, where I tried to advocate for getting the Jewish holidays off of school. So I have been advocating for the Jews for a long time in one way, shape, or form. I know we're going to talk later a little bit about being October 8th Jews. I feel like maybe on an advocacy publicly standpoint, yes, but my Jewish faith has always been important to me. It's been something that's been the backdrop of my whole life and something I didn't even think twice about. I did a book group last week with a group of Jewish and non-Jewish book club people who had just read my novel Blank, where the protagonist is Jewish, and I named the dog Dayenu, and like I didn't even think about, and they said, well, like, why did you do that on purpose? Were you making a statement? And I was like, no, it didn't occur to me not to make her Jewish. Like I don't know, I guess I just don't have as good an imagination, but it's just part of who I am, something that I didn't question or feel as attacked, obviously, until October 7th. And then I felt this primal need to help, as one does when feeling threatened. The project itself basically came out of desperation. I feel like I had spent from October 7th to June of 2024 posting, writing Substacks, talking to people, trying to do what I could to make a difference or explain why, just fight anti-Semitism and advocate and protect and all that. And honestly, I felt like it was just not making a difference at all. And I was getting really frustrated and feeling like non-Jewish people are never going to change their minds because it's a Jewish person shouting from the rooftop. So that's not going to work. And I need a non-Jewish person to help me advocate. And I need more allies, one. And two, my one voice alone is not loud enough. It's not enough. And, I guess Lizzie Zavetsky and her megaphone is taking another stab at it, but I just felt like I need more people. We need to do this together. We need to be in community and stand together and do something else. And the thing I know how to do is write and bring people together. And I know a lot of authors because I've been interviewing them on my podcast since 2018. I've interviewed over 2,000 authors and have basically made the author community my life, which is such a blessing because I've thought authors are rock stars from day one. In fact, I had a pen pal relationship with an author when I was in 5th grade. And this author, Zibby Owens, flew in from Michigan at one point and took me to tea at the Plaza. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever that I was actually going to tea with an author. So it's a longstanding love of authors. It's a longstanding love of Judaism. And I had done 2 anthologies recently. So I knew how to do those. And I had recently started a publishing house, so I knew how to publish. And all the pieces just kind of came together. And I said, I'm doing this, and we have to have it out by October 7th for the anniversary. And I went out wide and asked a bunch of people and gave them a very tight timeline. And they all did it. Well, the people who are in the book did it. And that's how it came to be.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's great. I was going to ask you at some point, I was going to ask you about the selection principle, but then I realized, and you say this in the preface too, that this is basically people who can write fast on a deadline.
Well, I went out wide. I invited 200 people, people I knew, and then other people who had been part of this Artists Against Antisemitism group chat, which is an organization I sort of was involved with helping start up in the aftermath of October 7th. And they asked their friends. And as Annabelle was saying earlier, sort of Jewish geography, we all just kept growing and friends of a friend. And now we're all friends. So all good.
Annabelle, what about you?
First of all, I want to just say thank you so much for having us. And when Zibby reached out to me about this book, I was so excited to do it because I don't consider myself, of course, the minute I think this, I'm going to say, no, but I do an October 8th Jew because I started identifying publicly as a Jewish person as an actress. I had this very silly pivotal moment when I was on Dinner and a Movie, hosting movies every Friday night on TBS, where I had a little confrontation with Ted Turner. And the confrontation was, it was a holiday show. We were supposed to do a Christmas show, I was told. So we were basically in a studio in Los Angeles and no one knew what we were doing. So we recorded a show where we celebrated Christmas, but also we had a Hanukkah menorah, which I had brought, and we lit candles, and I might have toasted an Oscar Mayer wiener over the menorah. And I got this
Jewish today, right?
Yeah. So I got a call from Ted Turner's office. They were very concerned that Jewish people might be offended by this. And I sent a message back saying, our show is on Friday nights. Any Jewish person who's going to be offended isn't watching our program. It's on after sundown. And it sounds so silly, but it had this effect on me of, as an actress, and I wasn't a writer back then, I hadn't really thought about identifying as a Jewish person. I was really busy trying to play lots of different roles, and that was just something that I hadn't wanted to be part of my identity. I thought I also didn't necessarily feel like many American Jews have felt, am I Jewish enough to say I'm Jewish? How Jewish am I? What did you have to, where's the threshold? I was bat mitzvahed, I worked on a kibbutz, I went to Jewish summer camp, but I don't belong to a congregation. We have all these things, different ways of being Jewish. And so that moment where I bristled, I just didn't think twice about standing up to Ted Turner and saying, this is how I practice my Judaism. It did something to me. And from then on, I began identifying as a Jewish person. And as a writer, it's become even more essential to my being because of the background, because no matter what I am, I'm always going to be Jewish. I feel I must identify. And not only that, it infiltrates all of my writing. And, as Zibby said about naming her dog Dianu, there are so many ways in which my being Jewish influences my writing. And in particular, I started writing about the Southern Jewish experience because of how othered Southern Jews were, particularly when my family came over from Russia. I felt that this was growing when I started writing about this, maybe even 10 years ago, growing into a big issue as we looked at how we bring in immigration and who gets to be American. So this has become a big subject for me to write about, and particularly this book, when Zibby, in that moment of, are we October 8th Jews, what that moment did for me was to say it's even more important right now to affirm that however we are Jewish as Jewish Americans, we are being Jewish now in our many different ways, and they are all valid and all important. And it is really important to recognize this community and I appreciated that Zibby had such a wide range of kinds of points of views, and that I think that adds to this idea that we are when people talk about a big tent, that is always my hope for the Jewish community, because we need that. We need to be able to recognize our community and not let everything tear us apart. That is the trend right now, is just the great divide. Everything that brings us together is important. And I saw this book as the beginning of a conversation about our community.
It's so interesting that the way you frame that, because I have noticed before, for a lot of Jews, a lot of American Jews, as Ibby says, there's often this moment where someone says, I mean, if you'll excuse the language, hell yes, I'm Jewish enough, right? And sometimes, often, I mean, the stereotypical idea is that often that happens because of anti-Semitism. I must be Jewish enough because I'm experiencing anti-Semitism. But this project is sort of going beyond that, is taking it to, that doesn't have to be the only, like, that's I guess that's another way of talking about the October 8th Judaism phenomenon. But let me just ask you one thing I mean, Zibby, you said that the author community is really your home, and Annabelle, you were talking about sort of the theater community. Those are both places where there's been some trouble, where it's hard. Maybe it's hard at first to feel at home as one did previously as a Jewish American writer. Can you talk about that at all? I mean, was that a big factor in putting this together? I mean, that your home was.
I mean, I would say there had been so many data points which fueled this fire, and being in the literary community, which has been really attacked. I felt this firsthand. And as I mentioned, this group chat, it wasn't just me, but 30 other women Jewish authors were constantly sharing ways that they had been targeted in some way. And maybe it hadn't happened to me, but it happened to them. For example, so many authors, as probably everybody on here already knows, but there were all these blacklists that came out with all of our names on. There were, like, I don't know, 10 different lists, 5 different lists, I don't know, with our varying sympathies. I wasn't on all of them, but do we want to be on this list? Right. So lists, I had my own book, Blank, which came out before Review Bombed, meaning somebody, people are giving it 1 star on Goodreads and calling me a Zionist racist. Yeah, I mean, people were signed, 1,000 plus authors signed that petition in Israel about not wanting Jewish representation and not wanting Jewish books to get put out. I mean, there was just, like, every day there seemed to be something, and the traditional media was not reporting on that. either. So, and I still feel that way. I mean, I'm in LA right now, and there's a big conference that's starting now called AWP. And one of the moderators forwarded me something yesterday that all moderators for this writers conference had gotten a note that said at the beginning of every event, let's all stand up and condemn Israel for being the oppressors that they are, and, genocidal this and that. And, I was CC'd on an email forwarding it to the Jewish Book Council. They are trying to help and advocate for it. They actually got a bunch of Jewish panels put in AWP because there hadn't been any. All of the panel pitches had been rejected. And so the Jewish Book Council advocated on our behalf. I would probably be there, but I'm sitting here, which is actually fine. All to say, it's going on all the time. It's not something that happened at the beginning, but now it's over. So I think as I see more and more of this, I feel obligated to speak out because it's not being publicized. Not like we want to say, oh, look, someone else picked on us today. But I do think it's really important because it's been swept underground. And part of that is part of the attack, if you will, has been incredibly intentional. I'm one of 30 plus producers on a movie called October 8, which is in theaters now. And it really goes through the systematic propaganda and intentional infiltration of US media and campuses and so many other places with an agenda that goes directly against us. So am I worried about being in the book world? I love the book world. Have I gotten a ton of pitches, both for the podcast and for the publishing house by Jewish authors? I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't save all of Jews in publishing. We only do a couple books a year, but what's going to happen? Because I think everybody is feeling very scared and threatened and wants to get their voices out. And I think now it's more important than ever to have Jewish stories be told. So I'm happy that I see it all firsthand and that I feel comfortable sharing when I see it, calling it out when I see it, and that I'm aligned with another, with a whole crew of women who feel similarly, many of whom are contributors to the book, and want to let people know what's happening. Because I feel like all that time in Hebrew school learning about Germany in the 1930s and all that, I've got to put it to some use, all of that, right? This is when it starts to happen, you call it out. And that's been in my head forever and ever. So I'm calling it out all the time and just hoping that the calling out itself is making a difference.
And the book's part of that, obviously.
And the book is part of that, yes.
Itself. Annabelle, what about you?
Well, I straddle two worlds. I mostly live in book world. That's my world. But I do, my origins are the theater world. And of course I work in entertainment. And, I want to hear all stories. I want to hear Jewish stories. I want to hear Palestinian stories. I want to hear every story. I just have a very broad reaction to all of the divestment lists and the petitions, and I worry about all of that. And actually, I just wrote a piece in Haaretz. I just published a piece, which if you Google me and Haaretz and Bathsheba Dance Company, you can read, which is, I'm going to be honest, even though that's right up my alley, I had never seen Bathsheba Dance Company. They're on tour from Israel right now. They're going around the world. The first I heard of it was in an email that was forwarded to me, urging me to boycott seeing them at the Brooklyn Academy of Music, because, and this is where I think the world we live in gets really troubling. Not because the artists, the founder of Bathsheba and the company itself is a very progressive company whose founder has taken a stand for a Palestinian state, and they're very progressive people, but not progressive.
They've been around a while, right? I mean, they're not an upstart.
Progressive enough. They did not meet the metric of this group of theater artists. And I was reminded of the quote by Bertolt Brecht, "Will there be singing at the end of the world, and when the world ends, and it says, yes, there will be singing about the world's end. And I thought, how about dancing? Is it going to be dancing? What will don't we want to hear from everyone? And I understand there's even more nuances to that question. Well, who do we get to hear from? Who gets funded? This is a very large question, but I didn't, as I said, I didn't even know about the company till I went to see them. And I was so moved by this performance. And it was a performance about empathy. It was a performance about inclusion. It was hilarious. It was moving. We were laughing. We were crying. We were all together in the theater. And I thought, what is happening here? It just, I've always felt this way, but it really coalesced this idea that I had to write honestly, against the petitions and the boycotts, and on every side. Once you go down one road, then you open up the door to the next boycott and the next petition. And I think that's really troubling and dangerous, and makes our world smaller. And what do we want? Why did we go into the arts? Why did I always think, like Zibby, books, authors were rock stars? Because they opened up my world, and theater opens up my world, music, books. And so all these things are in danger when we go down that road. And so anything I can do to add my voice to that. It's such a difficult time in terms of what we put out in the world. That has to do, of course, as we all know, with the speed at which things go out. Who's in your Signal chat group, who you're tweeting to. I mean, everything's so fast. And I think that has created its own problems of reactivity. And we were talking, Zibby, right before you joined us, and right before everyone joined us, about how do we react in times like this. And I was quoting the art critic John Berger, who said a phrase in reaction to very troubling times: calm is a form of resistance. And not that outrage isn't important, and not that taking a stand, and he wasn't arguing against propulsive action, but this idea of calm as a form of resistance. How do you not remain in a state of reactivity every single moment of the day? You feel like your hair is on fire, but to be deliberate, to think about what you want to put out into the world. And that is why I still believe, and I will always believe, in reading and books, because we know that the authors, or there's the assumption, mostly we know, that people have taken a lot of care in what they're writing. And I was rereading On Being Jewish Now this morning, thinking about this, and I was just struck by the variety of stories. And I love them all, so I don't want to say, oh, this is my favorite, that is my favorite, but I do love that there's everything from having an argument with a mohel about
That's a good one.
which I love.
Yeah, Amy Effort's piece about, yeah.
Yes, I love that. And these sort of high and low levels of deep, there's all this different kinds of depth of thinking. There's a story about a couple of stories that deal with bar and bat mitzvahs that happen at a later age. And so there's just so much intentional contemplation. And that's what we get in books. That's what I'm always hoping to add. And so I've tried to not comment in social media about the times we're living in so much, because that's so quick. So this book, I know for me, gave me a chance to contemplate and be intentional about what I want to add to the conversation. And what I wanted to add was inclusivity and community and empathy. And that's why I'm so grateful to be a part of thinking before speaking on the page.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I mean it's in a world where everything's moving so fast. Yeah, a book kind of slows everything down, right? A book is there. So let's talk about what's happened since you put this book out into the world. I mean, how it's come back at you. How are people using it? I mean, obviously they're reading it, but how are they
They're
incorporating it?
using it as doorstops
Right, exactly. I don't
and
mean it that way, but I was thinking,
kindling for their
right.
fires. No, it has been met with such a positive reception. And I'm really glad that Annabelle highlighted the diversity of thought and opinion and background, because I was so relieved to find that among the people I asked to contribute. There are people from all different countries, from Israel to Australia to, well, the US, all over the US, small towns, big towns, cities, not cities, different races. There's one man who's Black and Jewish and gay. There's people who didn't know they were Jewish until they were grown-ups, people who felt Jewish and almost didn't feel comfortable contributing. And like Annabelle's tent, at all the events that I've been doing for this book, I have found that exact thing, that people, just because we're Jewish does not mean we have one thought, one look, one background. We are such a diverse community, one that I think doesn't, other people might not understand that as well. And of course, there are so many things other people don't understand about the Jewish people, but that's one thing of just how diverse in thought and background and everything, which I think is really important. And at the events too, even politically, I mean, people are incredibly divided, not always in such a great way. Like there was one person at one of the events, and this is an answer to your question, how has it been met? What reception has it gotten? And one of the things that I have been focused on is doing tons of events, both virtually like this, but also in different communities all over. And if I could just like teleport myself, I would do more of these events. But luckily, there was an event in Boca with 7 contributors this weekend, and I'm here in LA. So it doesn't have to be me, right? There's 75 of us out there talking about this. But in every community, one person said, if only we could put aside for a minute the huge divisiveness within the US politically, and if we could just stop fighting against each other over some of these things and just say like, okay, yes, we might not agree. Let's just like put this here in service of something else, right? But there are many things that we disagree on that are sort of tearing the community apart, which doesn't help as we all, get out there and advocate for ourselves and keeping us together. Because really, and I've talked to a number of rabbis about this, like there is no winning the fight against anti-Semitism, right? You can't stop it. It's part of culture. The most we can do really is unite our own community, strengthen the bonds within ourselves so that we can present as not a joyous people, but a group of people who know who we are, right? Even if that means we're very different, which is fine. I mean, think about the average family. Like I have 4 kids. I mean, everybody's so different. But we're all in a family. And I feel like that's the attitude. We can have, tiffs over Thanksgiving dinner, but that doesn't mean we're not in the same family. So I think just remembering that the arguments themselves do not divide us. They're just a piece of being a part of us. And also, to Annabelle's point, social media is just one of 8 million, not 8 million, but one of a ton of ways to advocate and help right now. And some people are comfortable with that. I'm comfortable in my way doing that, but that does not mean it's the most powerful. And it doesn't mean that the people who are not posting on social media aren't supportive of other Jewish people. It does not mean that. There are people who are quietly doing amazing, amazing work in so many ways. So I do think sometimes people can be quick to say, well, he hasn't posted or she hasn't done this. It's like, well, yeah, but did you see that movie? Or did you see like this? Did you, the storyline that this producer got on a mainstream show? Really? So there are many ways. But as long as everybody brings whatever they can contribute, then we're all better off.
Do you feel that way about any of the contributors? Like, look what this person is doing. Look at this little story that's so. I mean, do you have any? Annabelle said she didn't have any like favorite contributors, but I mean, maybe something leaps out at you in that way. you know?
I mean, I know from getting to know all the contributors how they're all helping. On the most part, the contributors are more comfortable being public, hence they contributed. It's almost like the 125 people who said they didn't want to contribute. What's up with them? Like, what are they up to? And, some of whom I follow and some of whom, might say something in a newsletter or might be publishing other people's pieces, might be helping in different communities. So I just think there are lots of ways. And for everybody listening, it doesn't even matter if you have a big platform or whatever. Like, you don't have to be hanging out with Ted Turner to make a huge difference. And you don't have to be on social media. Like, sometimes the most powerful thing is like talking to people in your bridge group and changing one mind by having an in-depth conversation and handing the book to a couple non-Jewish people and saying like, hey, let's talk about this. And it ripples if everybody can do that. So I think everyone knows what they can do and what they're good at and the way they can make an impact in the community, big or small, they're a part of, because we're all in a community. Like, that's just part of being human. So when you think about how to be impactful in your own community, think about what makes you you and what you love doing and what you're good at and how you can use that. Do you love to bake? Do a challah bake? Anyway, I'm rambling, but yeah.
No, it sounds like, yeah, Annabelle.
I wanted to speak to that. So, I think it's an interesting time because we all have these personal platforms, which is social media, that we reach different amounts of people. For me, I mean, if you look at my Twitter account, my Instagram, it always says Jewish mother, writer, before this is just a part of my identity, whether or not I'm writing, although I do write about issues, but for me, in terms of like politically, I don't want to be a distraction. I don't want to be the story that, that there's bigger stories right now, so in sort of intentional, how do I interact in the world in a Jewish way, in a way that I feel uplifts the community and connects the community? Well, one is, I think it's important to, if I mean, I don't want to tell anyone else what to do, but for me, it's important to identify as a Jewish person. And I live my life in ways that speak to my values as a humanist and as a Jewish person, and to my Jewish, the way I understand Judaism, what Judaism calls me to do in the world. And I hope that as I walk around in the world, not only in my writing, but for instance, I got recruited into a project founded by Jessica Hecht, the actress, Broadway actress, who, when she was playing Golda on Broadway, founded something called the Campfire Project. We do arts, education, and theater. We bring song and dance to young people in refugee spaces. So this has become really important work. Now, this is not a Jewish project. Some of us happen to be Jewish, and we've gotten support from Workers' Circle and other organizations that are Jewish founded. But I know that when I am volunteering with the young people, some of them who have come to this country as immigrants, seeking asylum from Ecuador, from Venezuela, from Guinea, these amazing young people, they may have never met a Jewish person before or been unaware of that. So I want their experience of America and of the world to include a really positive experience with a Jewish person.
Sure.
I might, and I might be that person. I never met a Jewish person before here. This is a very, very small action that can reverberate through the world as people who we have contact with, sometimes I get to reach a lot of people at once, and sometimes I get one-on-one interaction, and it might profoundly change someone's view of what a Jewish person is. And to me, that's really important. And I think that's something all of us, whatever our purview is, can take on as a call to action. If we have a call to action from October 8th, let us, be a light, a small light, as Meep Geist said.
So
Also,
you
Annabelle, you should talk about your play. Annabelle was just starred in this amazing play in New York City, which was so powerful. Talk about, I mean, that's a prime example of like how you're contributing.
Well, I don't usually act anymore, but I couldn't resist because of the story. I was recruited back into the theater. They get you back in. And what did it was if you're a New York Times reader, there was recently a profile of Ivy Seamus. She is the teacher who taught at Parkland in Florida and who survived the Parkland massacre. The story was the opportunity to tell her story and to play her and give voice to her story was made even more impactful for me as a project to take on, because she was teaching a Holocaust studies course when the shooter began shooting into her classroom, which is what she did at Parkland. And she used that class as a jumping off point to look at empathy and to understand history, but to build community with these young people. And this class was really popular. People loved this class because they learned through doing. She did wonderful, exciting engagements with them that made this understanding of the Holocaust and what that meant and how that reverberates today. And she used that as a jumping off point to look at genocides all over the world. Really sort of, Ivy is a brilliant, wonderful person. And she leads with love and laughter, even after that experience. And I just had to tell that story. And we were doing that at 59 East 59th Street. I hope we get to do it again around
What's
the
the
country.
play called?
The play is called Room 1214. That's the name of the classroom. That was the number of the classroom where she was teaching. And it's such a great teaching play, and also I think pretty entertaining. But I think that it was really a powerful experience. We had people whose parents survived the camps came. There were young people who live with this fear of school shootings. It touched on antisemitism, racism, a lot of isms that are really popular right now, conspiracy theoryism, and activism. And so it was just a wonderful experience. I'm always looking for opportunities like that. And in that case, those words, I just was so happy to give voice to that. So I got to contribute as an actor to that cause. And that's always something I'm looking for, is how can I contribute something to the world that, makes it just a little bit better and is fun too. It was a tough one, but there was humor in it, and that helps.
Wow, that sounds so inspiring. Right, and bridge building. It's not just for people who are inside a particular community. So you did mention October 8th, and we wanted to talk about what it means to be an October 8th Jew, if there is such a thing. And I feel like we've actually kind of been talking about this the whole time, but let me just put it out there. Do you think, what is an October 8th Jew in your experience? Is that a thing, as the kids say?
I do think it's a thing. I think that October 7th was like the big earthquake that made everybody look around their house and say, wait, maybe I shouldn't hang a photo over my bed, right? It's that kind of thing, right? Once you've been shaken like that, you do everything differently as a result. And I think this shook so many people who thought that perhaps these types of things were in the past and wouldn't affect them because, obviously we've been in this sort of golden age, so to speak, of post-Holocaust. If you can call like post-traumatic times golden. But anyway, I think many people didn't know that they would have to step up, and that, I think back again, not to keep talking about the Holocaust, but nobody cared if you were like a quarter Jewish, right? Like you were still getting on the train. So it's kind of the
Jewish
same.
enough, like we were talking about earlier. Were you
Right.
Jewish enough? Unfortunately, yes. It wasn't up to you.
So I think there's something to it. Like, I'm being targeted. I need to figure out my place in the world. And what does that mean? And what does it mean to be Jewish now? And I think for me, it always helps me to write when I can't figure anything out, or just frankly about everything. I mean, that's how I process. That's how I think. And, recently we launched a Substack to go with the book called onbeingJewishNow.substack.com, where people can also write their own thoughts and feelings related to this, because I think there is this deep need to process and sort through, and what does it mean to me, and let me think about my ancestors, what happened with my family history, and where am I today, but what about this group of friends of mine who's not, what about the fact that I haven't been speaking up when I hear these jokes, people are just dealing with so much. So I think there is a thing. I think that on balance, it's going to end up being a positive thing. I guess I'm an October 8th Jew in some respects, in that, this is, I guess if I even just take a percentage of my feed on Instagram, do you know what I mean? Like how much is being, because that's like what's going on in my head is what's I'm posting. So I do think it's a thing, and I think it's probably a good thing.
I'm glad you came out and said that, because I didn't, the idea that something good comes out of all this terrible darkness is a really powerful idea. And probably it's not the first time we've seen that with the Jewish community, but, Annabelle, what do you think? Are you an October
Thank
Jew?
you. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Amy.
No, not at all. I want to hear about your take on all this.
I think in this particular moment as well, it's any kind, I bristle at any label, right? Like, so initially, and I'm so glad we're talking about it, because as I had this reaction was, oh, I'm not an October 8th Jew. Maybe I am an October 8th Jew. I mean, I think of myself as a Jewish summer camp Jew. That, because
like you didn't come to this yesterday. You were, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Jewish summer camp really, was like the basis of so many things in my life. I did my first play at Jewish summer camp. I was in How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. I had one line, I forgot it. It wasn't a good start. I got felt up for the first time at Jewish summer. The really important issues.
I was Anne Frank in the Diary of Anne Frank at my summer camp, FYI. Yes, that was my crowning artistic, theatrical achievement. But anyway,
definitely not an October 8th Jew in that case. An Anne Frank Jew.
Actress, and I missed my one line. So there you go. But I had so many formative experiences that, and also that sense of community in that summer camp. That wasn't to do with how religious you weren't religious. So I think that that's one of those also touchstones of American Judaism, is so many of us were sent to summer camp, where we had this Jewish-y experience, and yet at the same time, I do feel like it was another one of those experiences, like Zibby said, a jolt to the system, a wake-up call to say, oh, was I taking for granted that that I thought we were in a different place than we are? And I think that it's just hard to not think that that's whether or not we resist that label, because I do think labels are really difficult right now. What are you? And that's the thing I try to stay away from in social media. What are you? Just these labels, this intensity of that. But I do think that that's true, that we all really, I don't know who didn't feel it.
Wait, people are asking in the chat which summer camps we went to.
What summer camp? I went to Camp Blue Star in North Carolina, second generation Blue Star. My dad was a counselor there, and I still have friends from Blue Star.
Of course
Oh
you
my
do.
gosh.
And you, Zibby? I was going to ask you that myself.
Well, the camp where I played Anne Frank was called Camp Wakila, a co-ed camp that I went to for 2 years. Prior to that, I also went to Trip Lake, which I hated, but my mom had gone, so I was trying to be nice. Anyway, whatever. And then I went to another camp called Three Pines, but yeah, it was Camp Wakila.
So before we turn to questions, I just want to turn back to the book itself a little for a minute to maybe wrap up this portion, and we do have some questions. So I couldn't get either of you to say you had a favorite thing in the book, but the two things that I think might have been my favorites were the story by Judy Battalion about how she was giving this big book talk at NYU, and she was terrified about it, and she was sure she was endangering all these people, and she'd done all these other book talks, but she'd never worried about physical safety. And then she went, and it was unbelievably Hamish, and people were so grateful just to be together talking about her. She wrote a wonder, she writes about Jewish heroines of the resistance, in World War II. And so that was one. And the other one, Dara Levan writes about how she loses her cousin on October 7th, and her husband mentions this to a colleague that he barely knows who's in Israel, a guy named Haggai, and Haggai says, "Oh, give me their address. I'm going to go to the Shiva, and I'm going to, what do you want me to tell your wife's relatives about this guy?" And then he comes back with all this personal stuff. And I'm thinking those things say something about me, because those really are about, community kind of triumphing over everything. But I wanted to ask you, Lisa Barr has this great line. She says, "Loud and proud is the new never again." So I want to know, do you think that's right? Is loud and proud the new never again? I just thought it was an interesting way of hooking those ideas together.
I mean, you want to go first?
I'm thinking about it. When I hear loud and proud, I think Rainbow Coalition, and Rainbow Pride. And so I think for me, the proud and it has a different association.
Yes. Yeah.
But again, like, first of all, I love her story, and I whatever it is, I don't know. I don't know enough about trends. I'm constantly behind in these things. Maybe it is. Maybe it's a rallying cry. Maybe I'm willing to entertain any idea, but I don't think there's anything wrong with either of those two things, loud or proud. So sure. Let's do it. I maybe that's a call to action.
I mean, I think what she's really saying is just be engaged, right? You don't have to be loud in terms of jarring. You don't have to be proud in terms of wearing a t-shirt about it, right? But I think to not hide and to own your identity, I think that's really what she's saying. That today, what we can do is we can own being Jewish. We can use ourselves as examples of what it means, like Annabelle was saying before, like I wear a Jewish star now. I didn't used to do that, but I'm like, okay, I want people to know I identify with this. This is who I am, but I don't have to like throw it in your face. I'm not like, it's not like full on bling, but like, I think we should not, I think that in response, Jews have a tendency to want to hide, right? It's how we survived so much of life, right? Hiding and getting through. And so our instinct is not always to be like, here I am. So I think it's more just getting a little more comfortable with saying, Oh, yes, I am Jewish, actually.
You know, now when I think about this now I'm going to just change everything I just said.
Go ahead.
Funny thing is that I do a lot of traveling because I do a lot of speaking. If you follow my work at all, I've been writing in the Washington Post and the New York Times about being diagnosed with a lung cancer during COVID. And this is also the subject of my next book. The End of My Life is Killing Me, a hilarious look at, at rekindling joy while living with existential dread, something I didn't know would be so important for everyone when I started writing this book. But I travel around the world giving talks about the living as a person who is in treatment. So in the last year, I've been all over the world. Here I am in Rome right now. I'm having a residency at the American Academy of Rome. I don't know if before October 7th, I don't know if I would have said in the first sentence, just about when I meet people, something about being Jewish. I do tend to do that much more as if you couldn't tell when I'm talking, but I've tended to put that out there. In fact, I was at a conference in Singapore, and we had a princess from Jordan there who refused to acknowledge the Israeli delegation. And that was so upsetting in that context as well. I believe I mentioned to everyone at every time I spoke, first thing was, and you know, I'm Jewish. And as a Jewish person in treatment, I just work that into everything. But I do think that that has become something that's become more important about my putting out there in the world since then. So I'm just going to backtrack on every single thing I said. Maybe I am an October 8th Jew, and maybe I am loud and proud about it. So this is what a book can do, is make you contemplate and really think, wait, do I know myself? Do I know my values? How am I in the world? The books just work their magic to you in that way. So it's even done that for me. As much as I think I've thought about it, I have more.
Wow. Well, you two are so inspirational. Thank you so much for coming on and also for everything you're doing. I am going to turn it over to Suzanne for, I guess there might be a couple of questions, but thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank all three of you. Thank you, Amy, as well. Really appreciate that conversation. What I wanted to say as someone who, I didn't read the book, I listened to the book, and I mentioned this earlier, that most of the 75 contributors read their own stories. Zibby filled in for those who couldn't. And there was something really nice about listening to people tell their stories in their own voice. I know for me personally, for a lot of people, October 8th, they may have already felt Jewish, but they felt very lonely. And one thing about this book, I think, is that you're hearing stories from others, and you see that there's other people like you who had some of the same feelings and experiences. And you talked a little bit about forming community, and I found after October 8th, being more intentional in finding those communities. I have a lovely network of friends, and one group, for instance, for Purim, we just decided to do our first Hamantaschen bake. And when I was telling them about this book, they all knew about it, and they were so pleased. They wanted to talk about the book. And so I think this book can be many things to many people. One person wrote in, said it's very difficult to articulate a response to Amy's question of what it means to be an October 8th Jew. Not because it was cool or stylish. For me, I never felt more Jewish than I did on October 8th. I felt more connected and more much more urgency to use my voice as an emerging a writer than ever before. And so I think a lot of people are all over the map, but this book gives voice to so many different people. So thank you for that. One question I had was have you ever considered continuing on this theme and seeking out other voices like college students who have had this experience, so that people could really hear what it's like? There's not just one experience on campus since October 8th.
Yeah, in fact, I spoke to all the Hillel leaders at about 50 different campuses, and I was like, what do you guys think about on being Jewish now at college? And it was like crickets. I'm like, come on, you all. I know. I was like, I'm giving you a moment to be published. I don't know. It was like late at night. I don't think anybody was listening to me, but I have reached out to through Hillel to some of the campuses, encouraging people. We've had a number of college students write for the Substack, which has been great. We recently got pitched a very similar collection to ours, written by Jews in Australia now. So I'm trying to figure out what to do with that, if we should collaborate, how we can collaborate in some way with that publication. But yes, I've been thinking about how to keep it going. Should we do more? Should we, is this a whole series? I don't know. I think, I mean, we'll see. We'll see.
Lots of possibilities.
Lots of possibilities.
I noticed that so many of your contributors, the majority of them, were women. Was there a particular reason you think more men didn't respond?
I mean, I asked a lot of men to contribute as well. I don't know. I find myself reading sometimes more women written stuff. And so I maybe have more women. I should go back and see how many on my podcast have been women. If I had to guess, I would say it would be like 2/3, 1/3, something like that. So I just think it's who we went out to. I mean, I would have been happy to include more men. It just happened that way.
Mm-hmm. And thoughts on this book for a non-Jewish audience? Are non-Jews reading it? Do you want them to read it? How do you encourage them to read it?
Yes, some non-Jews are reading it and thanking me for now understanding more what the Jewish experience is. I have somebody I know came to an event because a friend brought her, not Jewish, read the book. She just went and saw October 8th. She texts me all the time. It's really changed her worldview in a significant way. So do I hear stories like that every day? No, but I hear enough of them that I feel like it's reaching people.
Great. Well, as we are about to end, I did want to just mention the play that Annabelle was in. I was able to come up to New York and see it, and you were fantastic. And I wanted to note that our dear friend Michelle Coholis Brooks was the playwright of that show, or that play, and it did play in Louisville. And I know she's always eager to have it elsewhere. So if there's anybody out there, I'm giving a little plug for her. Again, thank you, Annabelle and Zibby and Amy, for joining us. Thank you to our audience. I wanted to let everybody know that this will be on our website tomorrow morning. I put links in the chat to Annabelle's website and Zibby's website and the book and the Substack, and we will send a follow-up email that will also contain all of the links. Again, the book is called On Being Jewish Now. I encourage everybody to go to Zibby Owens. What's your website, Zibby?
Zibby Media.
Zibby
Media. Yeah.
And you can get it there, as well as other places that books are sold. And please go to momentmag.com, to our website, to sign up for our upcoming programs. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ciao from Roma.
Thanks.